Welcome to DRTSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shivaprasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab, hello and a warm welcome to D. Narasimha Reddy Garu. We are doing a series now. This has been the habit of DRTSPR channels on vital issues with wonderful guests like Narasimha Reddy Garu. I would love to have him on my channel all 7 days in a week.
That would be interesting for you.
Need 1 to 2 hours time permits if we have patience. And why? Because the issue concerning is so important. This is so important because when we say health is wealth, wealth means people of India, citizens of India, and their resources. So, how you administer resources is your right. If that right is infringed for the sake of someone by minuscule politicians and political parties, and again they dredge upon the religious mask as if they are trying to do something great for the Hindu majority in India. Nothing has been done. I am ready. I've been telling you right from 2014 to this. Almost 11 years we have passed. What is that you have done for Hindus except looting all resources, mines, ports, airports, and give it to Gujarati conglomerate? I am very clear. I am very audacious. Last week, we have exposed the modus operandi as to why US Justice Department and US Securities Exchange network or group filed cases. It is nothing but indictment of Adani and 8 others. Adani including his nephew. So we are very clear the modus operandi was to gather billions of dollars as investment towards some projects in India. And in India, if they want to get some money from US investors, gullible US people, I don't say they are gullible or innocent, because they go vouch by rule of law. That is how they caught hold of Adani's wrongdoings. He was trying to project something which was not going to happen or which has not happened vis-a-vis Andhra Pradesh state, Chhattisgarh, and DMK ruled Tamil Nadu, stating that 7 gigawatts is in requirement and they are already in agreement and they have already negotiated on the price. Wonderful. So, in doing so, they have offered bribes to the so and so call, whether it is AP or Chhattisgarh or Tamil Nadu. Whom they have offered, everything will come out. We are here to enlighten people on the mass corruption charges which US Department of Justice has leveled and indicted to Adanis, the green energy of Adanis and another company. Azure Power Global, that is the another company along with Adani's company. The SC's civil charges include securities fraud and wire fraud conspiracy, while the criminal charges filed by the USA Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York extend to violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The charges implicate not only Adani and his associates but also executives of Azure Power Global and 3 former employees, a Canadian pension fund, CDPQ, which holds stakes in Adani companies. Shame on you, Canadian company. You fellows, you are trying to destroy health of the world through vaccines. Now we are indulging in this also shamelessly. I am very clear. The same Kennedy who was part and parcel of us, the same Kennedy who is part and parcel of us anti-vax campaign as DRTSPR channel's champion, now he is going to be the health secretary and human rights secretary. Likewise, 2 other people who were there championing, they are going to be there on the US. Can you now, Adani and those stakes in Andhra Pradesh, whoever it is, Chhattisgarh and DMK, can they be let off after such serious charges? Now I'm going to show you today what we have done on this show earlier with Narasimha Reddy. Now you see the same BJP's ally has exposed Adani and Modi's nexus. They are trying to threaten other political parties who want to speak, whether it is the present governance in Andhra Pradesh or Chhattisgarh or wherever it is. I am going to show you, this is going to be big evidence for today. This is there on the screen before Mr. Narasimha Reddy again brings you a whole lot of things. This is there on your screen. BJP's ex-ally BJD exposed. BJP lies over Adani and Modi nexus. Odisha government had an agreement with SECI, Solar Exchange Corporation of India, whatever you say. A PSU under Modi government, only SECI dealt with Adani. Does BJP mean SECI was working as a middleman for Adani? Now, this is a big exposure which I have brought it out. I am challenging Mr. Modi and all. This is a big exposure. Why? Because how this government and Jaishankar External Affairs Minister lies after meeting Blinken on November 27th, stating that this is a private affair between Adanis and US Justice Department. Yes, Mr. Jaishankar, how long you will take the umbrage? Now I have exposed you, your own ally. Here it is a very clear-cut case of how the BJD was subdued and how directly SECI, which functions under the central government, had a nexus to deal with Adani and BJD-led Orissa government, wherein this ally BJD Chief Minister then Patnaik was a silent spectator. They have muted him and they have finished him off in the assembly elections also. That also I'm going to come back once the percentage of votes are going to come out, how people will get enlightened. We are here to protect people, participatory constitutional democracy, because India, the opposition Congress always fails. They expect people to vote for them, but for these channels and wonderful guests. So this is a big exposure. BJP's ex-ally BJD exposed BJP's lies over Adani and Modi nexus. Odisha government had an agreement with SECI, a PSU under Modi government. Only SECI dealt with Adani, not the Orissa government, not the chief minister. Now, what will you have to say on this? Then I have another one. How the costs of the Adani bribery scandal will be borne by India's electricity consumers and may increase power cuts. This I am going to show you. This is nothing but building upon our last show. How the regulatory authority can be fooled or taken control of. You take control of regulator authority, everything is gone. Here is the regulatory authority working under central government is SECI and all the governments, including SEBI and all. Even if Gautam Adani recovers from the US allegations against him and his group, the allegations that he paid off officials is likely to shake global confidence in India's booming renewable energy sector, make electricity costlier for states that may not and already cannot buy as much as they need, implying power cuts and higher costs for consumers, divert money meant for healthcare and other needs, and make India's government and economy more and more vulnerable, given the ever-rising dependence on the Adani Group. This is bullshit. India is a mixed economy. Why the hell you should have one conglomerate like Adani from Gujarati and another from Ambani? How they are finishing off all retail other businesses we have seen. What is this nonsense going on in India? They are finishing off public sector units, private, partly funded by government, and they are trying to impose this corporate culture by looting all resources in favor of one or two Gujaratis. And we have seen their nexus through electoral bonds. It's a shame. That is why now we are very clear on the charges made, how this money is being distributed at the cost of suffering electricity consumers of Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Tamil Nadu. And if it becomes pan-India, entire India will suffer lakhs of crores of burden on innocent Indians through these bribes and funding, if it happens. And US also should take cognizance of it. They should not succumb as they have done in Hindenburg case and Supreme Court of India. What is that you are doing? How and why the probe against SEBI is getting delayed and delayed? Because of the delay, don't you think they are indulging in more and more to loot resources to fund these political parties? But put all the burden, shamelessly corruption burden, on innocent Indians? Thank you, sir. Go ahead, sir. There are many others. I will show them later. I hope this will be enough to suffice of our argument what we have done last time.
Okay, I think okay, we were trying to understand the present Adani affair. That's the US Security and Exchange Commission filing a complaint or indictment in the New York court. I think we are trying to see this particular case from the framework of regulatory capture. We have also tried to understand what is regulatory capture. Essentially, in a free capitalist market-driven society, that the markets sometimes, or the people behind the markets, namely the corporates or companies, are likely to get off from what is promised as a competitive market economy. They're likely to become, let's say, conglomerates or powerful monopolies or oligopolies. Therefore, there are always a state which tries to put some checks. This is the reason why we have regulatory mechanism. It's in fact, earlier we had something called as Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Commission to check, let's say, companies becoming monopolies, capturing power of fixing price, and thereby putting consumers into disadvantage or loss. So therefore, essentially, the regulatory mechanisms are those which tries to balance between that of the corporate interest and that of the public interest. The corporates, of course, don't work without profits. The people would like to see that the corporates compete, efficiently produce, reduce cost, therefore they get, let's say, the prices that they pay are very competitive prices. If these two things do not happen, it's the role of the regulatory commission to check it. But most often, the powerful corporate entities tries to capture this regulatory function itself. That means that if you have, let's say, monopolies, or for instance, we have now competitive commission, monopolies restrictive trade practice commission. With the neoliberalism, it has washed off. It has been pushed out. It has not been abolished, but it's not there. So you have competitive commission that it is supposed to see that in any line of production, whether it is cement or clothing or let's say other fertilizers, it is supposed to look after whether the production process and the companies involved are, let's say, trying to compete with each other, reduce costs, show efficiency, reduce prices, benefit, let's say. In addition to making profits, they would also be in a position to supply things at reasonable prices. And that is the business. But what happens is the way in which the neoliberalism works now, most of the companies tries to capture the regulatory thing. The regulatory capture in the first stage means you work with the bureaucracy, control the bureaucracy. And then, of course, make them see the other side. Even if you're not, let's say, competing, if you're producing things and selling at a higher price, if you just capture the bureaucracy, they would allow you to do that. I mean, in fact, it is not across the globe in capitalist system. There are several instances, but we can mention some of the regulatory failures because of the regulatory capture. The famous example is the Securities and Exchange Commission itself. We know that during the 2008, the so-called financial crisis, it was lack of regulation or oversight by the Securities Exchange Commission, an unbridled expansion of the banking and finance companies. There was close nexus between that of what is called, the difference between banking and finance is vanished. Therefore, you have, let's say, the banks start generating bonds banks also deal with that of deposits and, let's say, lending. And then the entire system was allowed to work for its own. They have tried to create bonds, and then we all know that the entire subprime crisis, that expansion of credit through that of the conversion of, let's say, investments into bonds and selling it to other parties, that is shifting the risk to that of third or fourth, let's say, infinity, and then trying to make profits. This is what banks done, and these were not checked. In fact, the federal system itself, I mean, at that time, Greenspan was the federal, what we call is equivalent to that of a Reserve Bank governor. He was, let's allowing that, see, that big cannot do wrong, big cannot fail, but exactly the whole thing collapsed because of this. Similarly, they say, for instance, another famous example of regulatory capture is, for instance, the Boeing itself. For instance, the Boeing introduced the model 737, and then the Federal Aviation Authority in US is supposed to control or check the kind of, let's say, system they are putting into that of, let's say, new kind of aircraft. But the Federal Air Aviation Authority allowed Boeing to do whatever they did. Entire supervision, the kind of things that they were looking, they never, let's say, looked into that. That's also because the powerful Boeing controlling, let's say, the regulatory mechanism. The consequence was, as soon as they introduced 737, there were two major crashes. And in fact, the number of people in those crashes died is, I think, a shocking 346 people died. Only then it got exposed. And of course, there are examples of even, let's say, when it comes to drugs, particularly this is a major thing. The Food and Drug Authority of US is supposed to control the pharmaceutical industry. But I think this entire FDA, Food and the Drugs Authority, was manipulated by the powerful pharmaceutical companies, particularly in the case of opiates, that I think which perhaps give them some kind of tranquilizer kind of things. Unbridled expansion. Almost every third person in US is addicted to that of the opiates. The kind of consequence because of this capture, it's mind-boggling. Actually, between 1999 and 2017, as many as 6.45 lakh people died because of excess consumption of opiates, becoming addicted and consumption. I mean, these things happen. That's what happens is when certain kind of, let's say, products or, let's say, certain kind of practices are likely to hurt, let's say, the general public, not only their health, their pockets, and their own living, it is where the regulatory mechanism operates to control that. And then this is the same case here. We are talking in terms of electricity, when it's solar energy. If the prices are not properly controlled, if the agreements are carried on for 20 years from now on, the burden would be eternally on the consumers, in spite of, let's say, increasing, let's say, technology, increasing efficiency, reduced cost. If you agree for a certain price for 20 years, that's the agreement. That's exactly what happened in this case. So therefore, I think it's also said when the regulatory mechanism is captured through manipulating the bureaucracy, we call it as regulatory capture. In this case, in several other cases, the powerful corporates not only manipulate bureaucracy, control bureaucracy, but extend their control to that of political parties. Those in power, political power, they are being controlled. That is what is called as crony capitalism. In fact, if we have to look at this case, we have to look at it from the perspective of crony capitalism, much more powerful. They don't even care for, let's say, the officials or bureaucrats in regulatory mechanism. They get directives from the political bosses. So that's the kind of a link we see here. In fact, when we talk in terms of this issue, there is a lot of disturbance in the parliament, and repeatedly now, even yesterday, it was adjourned. The major demand is that there should be a joint parliamentary committee to look into this kind of, let's say, agreements carried on by a particular corporate. But the government refuses. Why should a government refuse when people or representatives, people ask, look into this business? It is not in the interest of the public. Therefore, put a parliamentary committee, let them examine it. Because your own regulatory mechanisms seem to have failed. So that exposes that we talk in terms of, let's come back to some details as to how this works. When you are powerful corporate with political kind of a control, if you come to that of disagreement, when we are talking in terms of between that of solar energy regulatory corporation and that of AP government and several other, there are four other states, Jammu Kashmir, Odisha, Chhattisgarh. These are all involved in this agreement, but the major agreement seems to be Andhra Pradesh. So how was it done? I mean, in fact, the first step is, we have mentioned this, when the Solar Energy Corporation of India tried to, let's say, put up tenders. The first step itself is the one which is exclusionary in nature. That means you control the security of exchange regulatory corporation to suit your interests and to eliminate competition. For instance, they floated tenders not only for power, solar power, but also for solar cell manufacturing. This is exceptional. What other companies say is that we generate only power and sell power. We don't produce, let's say, equipment for generating solar power. Therefore, not many entered. Hardly anybody. There was hardly any competition. And then second one is that once that elimination happened, it becomes almost a monopoly. You are bound to give, let's say, contract to the price that is quoted by, again, the price quoted. Whoever entered there, entered on the basis of the contemporary price. At that time, it is said per unit solar power was readily available for 2.46 or so, 2.49. But I think the price quoted by the Adani Green is as high as 2.96. And therefore, nobody can compete. It's very high price. But interestingly, when I think all competition eliminated, when the tenders were awarded to Adani Company, there is a sub-clause that appears in that. The sub-clause is that if the company wins the tender, it is up to that company to negotiate even reduction in that price. This not many people would know. And that's why what happened, when they bid for 2 rupees 92 per unit, there was no state distributory company, electricity distributor company, ready to take that, because at that time the power was available for less than that price. Therefore, nobody was coming in. Therefore, it became delicate for the solar, that's the Central Solar Energy Regulatory Corporation, that they said that if nobody comes, we can't help. Therefore, they allowed the Adani Green to negotiate with those states which are willing to buy. No state is coming forward, and therefore, in this case, the company must bring forward somebody to accept this kind of a price. That's how they get into operation. But what happens is the money they raised in the United States through that of Security Exchange Commission was supposed to be given assurance that they got the tender and agreement for purchase of this power, because you have tried to borrow there by trying to say that I am going to, let's say, get the power purchase agreement. On that basis, I give, let's say, the security. The time given was 90 days. But within 90 days, they got the response, no state came forward. Therefore, they went ahead with that of negotiating directly with the states. It's a very interesting thing that the deal is between that of the power generating corporation, solar generating corporation, Adani Green, and that of, let's say, uh, Solar Energy Regulation Corporation, which acts as a mediator to that of others. The Solar Energy Corporation itself is not able to get any responses. Therefore, the company itself get into operation. That's how they went to other states, including the major one is that of Andhra Pradesh. What happened in Andhra Pradesh? Andhra Pradesh already floated. At that time, the government floated tender for solar power of some 10,000 megawatts. And then this was under negotiation. Possibly that whoever was willing as a response to that tender perhaps would have come for, let's say, a price less than that of 4.92 rupees per unit, which is Adani's price. So when Adani's, we refer to that of this particular case of Andhra Pradesh and Adani Green, the negotiations started, and then the negotiations, they suggested that we have already, in the process of buying, we have floated a tender. They said that no, we have won this kind of, let's say, securities, solar energies tender. Therefore, we'll be in a position to supply. Then they raised the question as to your price is 4.92, it's too high. Then they agreed in the negotiations to reduce the price. It appears in this Solar Energy Regulation Corporation at the center, there is a clause which says the company which wins quotations from the Solar Energy Corporation can negotiate with the state distributor agencies and then reduce the price also with them in negotiation. That's how they have reduced the price for Andhra Pradesh. Let's say Andhra Pradesh means that Andhra Pradesh distributory company, which perhaps operates at the helm of the state government, the political power. That they will ask the distributor company to buy power. So that's how they said that we reduce, and in the process, Andhra Pradesh was forced to, or willingly perhaps, cancel their own 10,000 megawatts tender, agreed to, let's say, buy the solar power from Adani Green at the rate of 2 rupees 49 paise, which was supposed to be a reduced price, competitive price. It is here the difficulty comes. It's exactly in these negotiations because the contract is for 20 years. The price is, let's say, the one which is supposed to be for 2.49. Everybody was expecting the prices to come down. It was a big risk for the state government. And therefore, there is also others who would supply at that price. To screen that off, there are several things which happen. First is, when it comes to the question of agreeing, getting them to agree through that of, let's say, this power distribution company for this 2.49 per unit price, obviously there were negotiations, dealings. And one of the things that after this US indictment, which has come widely in the press, the Minister for Energy in Andhra Pradesh, one Srinivas Reddy, he has come out with a statement that in the midnight at 1 a.m., I was pulled out of the bed and asked to sign this agreement. And he said that he refused to sign this agreement because he found that there is something, a lack of clarity in this agreement. And then, of course, overruling that minister, they brought it into the cabinet. Andhra Pradesh cabinet was made to agree for this price. That's exactly reason seems to be. Now it comes out. Earlier it was not known. This minister resigned from the cabinet. And he was supposed to be a close relative of the then chief minister and his father as well. That was the close kind of a relation. In spite of that, he resigned. Nobody knew why he resigned. Now it's coming out. He resigned because he didn't sign the agreement in the midnight and the cabinet approved it. This is coming out now. And then let's turn to that present Andhra Pradesh situation. We are concerned about, let's say, what happens to the consumers in Andhra Pradesh over next, let's say, 20 years for which the agreement is made. See, it is quite clear now the estimates show, as far as the Adani Green is concerned, they were prepared to pay such a hefty kind of, let's say, we call it as a bribe, almost to the extent of, let's say, $250 million or something like 1,750 crores. That's what the figure that's coming in as a bribe paid to the trade in the case of Andhra Pradesh. They pay that much because their estimation of the gain is to the tune of, let's say, $2 billion over the next 20 years of agreement. It is something like, say, 2 lakh crores, roughly, something close to that. It's every year you get, let's say, that kind of a benefit. So the company has a clear sight about, let's say, what they get, and therefore they're prepared to share a part of it as a bribe. But what happens to the consumer with whom we are interested? We talk about this ultimately because of the public interests. When it comes to the public, it would be even at 2 rupees 49 paise per unit for next 20 years. It would be a huge burden because the prices of solar energy is likely to come. Some people predict it will come down to that of 1 rupee 50 paise as well. And then in addition, there are rumors, there is no clarity. There are reports in local newspaper Andhra Jyoti, there are reports in Economic Times. They say in addition to 2 rupees 49 paise, it involves payment of, let's say, interstate transmission charges. Of course, there is some point made, some agency says it is not there, interstate transmission charges. But there is some other charge which is supposed to be transmission losses internally also. That is to the extent of 50 paise. But what comes out is whatever might be the other charges, the charge that is agreed upon is, even if it were to be 2 rupees 49 paise per unit, the people would pay through their nose higher price in the next, let's say, 20 years. That's the commitment. But what is the dilemma now? Now, in fact, there seems to be a dilemma. If you turn to that of Andhra Pradesh, see, this is the power of what could be called as the conglomerates like Adani. They have a huge kind of, let's say, political links and capacity to raise resources from different places. They can maneuver, but perhaps, in fact, we all refer to that of how the immediate reaction of Kenyan Prime Minister cancelling the airport maintenance and that of also transmission lines. But that's one case. But if you turn to that of, let's say, other cases, there are also, their power is such, no, there are also, for instance, the neighbor of Kenya, Tanzania, where Adani is, let's say, they are going to be world's biggest port builders, port operators. That's Adani's power. In Tanzania, they're building a seaport in Dar es Salaam. Tanzania government or that the Seaports Authority of Tanzania, he came out and saying, we have no problem, we'll continue the contract. And Israel, of all the places, now Israel's name, now we know how we see it. Now that's the kind of thing. Israel has come out. Now we have no problem. In Israel also, in the north, they're building a seaport, Haifa. I mean, that's Haifa is the place in Israel. They are building, Adanis are building a port. Israel also has come out saying that we have no problem. They will continue to build. They will not only that, but they have a factory producing drones there. There are a factory producing armaments there. We have no problem. They would allow them. And then, of course, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka also, they are building a major port there. The Ports Authority of Sri Lanka also has come out and said that we will not have a problem. We'll allow them. And then, of course, Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi, there is a so-called sovereign corporation called International Holding Company. That's the government company. They also said that we don't have any problem. We'll continue to do our business with them. And in fact, at home, State Bank of India, which is the biggest lender, 30,000 crores is the money that is with ADANIS. They also said, of course, they didn't go to the extent of saying, we will lend them. We keep a watch. I mean, what I'm trying to suggest is, in spite of the fact that there is some kind of dealing which is likely to hurt the public in one particular country or state, there are many who are involved in these dealings with that of these Adani companies are not able to, let's say that they would, let's say, de-link their links with that of that. Therefore, what happens is, now you have seen the stocks also. We have earlier talked about Hindenburg report. The stocks collapsed early, but they bounced back. And same thing here. When the US indictment was filed in New York on 21st trip, it was actually filed on 24th October in the New York, but of course it came out in only November 21st. The stocks collapsed, 78% decline in the stocks, but they have come back now. And therefore, dealing with that of this kind of corporations, which have become more powerful than some governments itself. But this is exactly where we have seen in Latin America the power of, let's say, the corporations trying to remove governments there. We have cases of Chile, we have cases of several other countries where if the government came against this corporation, like say mining, particularly copper and other minerals, they tried to manipulate and remove the governments. I mean, you see that the present Argentina, which is, I think, seems to be model for Trump himself, is a tool of, let's say, what happens to that of the capital. They've completely captured the whole thing. He's talking in terms as if he's a businessman. He doesn't want state anywhere. He doesn't want public corporations. He doesn't want any regulation. I mean, there can't be anything beyond that when it comes to the power of the crony capital. So in this context, when we start, let's say, looking at the kind or power of this capital, taking the form of, let's say, political links, becoming, let's say, crony capital, they cause such huge kind of, let's say, loss to the public, general public and people. But yet, I mean, we have seen that, let's say that we talked about opiates destroying the health of the US, such a powerful place. But the corporations become more powerful than the governments. And here we see that these contracts in critical area like power purchase, everybody purchases. This poor man, rich man, everyone purchases. It's not only industries.
Last 1
If
minute.
such commitments are made, through the power of the crony capital, the suffering of, let's say, the people by way of, let's say, increasing burden on them by additional prices they pay than the competitive prices will last longer. And therefore, we have several, I mean, of course, we have not gone into the history of this particular conglomerate because we are talking about this specific instance. But if you look back how they have become so powerful, we can go back. I mean, there are arrests of this one family members right back in 99. The same thing happened to that of power distribution. In fact, the Kenyan government cancelling power distribution lines is exactly a replica of what they have done in Gujarat and, let's say, Maharashtra. They have just
We will
raised the
stop here.
prices.
We will stop here. This is going to cause huge damage to public. People have to pay
Absolutely.
more for energy charges, and the
Yeah,
democracy is also in danger by these
absolutely.
conglomerates. And the history of this conglomerate, we are going to come back in the third series. How Adani has become so powerful in spite of the severe setbacks which they